phone, the hotel room rings, and it's the Attorney General. And he opens the conversation. Who the hell is Diane Nash?
From the years 1959 to present day, Diane Nash, a civil rights leader, strategist, and organizer of the student wing movement from throughout the 1960s, took a stand in history by showing that a young black woman can make a difference and make an incredible impact on society, even nonviolently.
I think we all want to know, where did it come from? Where did the courage come from?
And we really took seriously trying to create a beloved community. One of the things that we frequently did when we got ready to have a demonstration or to do something was to say and really mean, is this the loving thing to do?
Diane Nash, a very underappreciated civil rights activist and feminist, was born on May 15, 1938 in Chicago, Illinois, to Leon Nash and Dorothy Bolton Nash. Diane was raised as a Roman Catholic and grew up attending public schools throughout her childhood. In spring of 1956, Nash graduated from Hyde Park High School and began her college career at Howard University in Washington, D.C. Shortly after, Nash transferred to Fisk University in Nashville, Tennessee. While attending Fisk University, Nash witnessed real racial segregation for the first time in her young life. Starting in early 1959, Nash began to attend nonviolent protest workshops that were led by Reverend James Lawson, who was affiliated with the Nashville Christian Leadership Conference, or the SCLC. The SCLC was made up of 60 black ministers and civil rights activists that made an effort to replicate the very successful strategy of the Alabama bus boycott.
As I walked from one sit-in to another, there were maybe 5 or 6 young white guys with the leather jackets who were exactly the kind who would attack us. One of them said to his friend, "That's Diane Nash. She's the one to get." And I became just overcome with fear.
In late 1959, Nash protested exclusionary racial policies by participating in sit-ins at downtown Nashville's lunch counters. By February 1960, mass sit-ins that began in Greensboro, North Carolina, spread all over the South and hit Nashville. Diane Nash soon led multiple nonviolent protests that involved hundreds of both black and white students. Thus, by time it was early April, Nashville's mayor, Ben West, publicly called for the desegregation of Nashville's lunch counters. While this was happening, Nash and many other students from all across the South got together in Raleigh, North Carolina for the NAACP, or the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, that was urged by Ella Baker, an incredible civil rights activist that worked with and led multiple civil rights organizations. Soon after the Nashville sit-ins, Nash helped coordinate the 1961 Freedom Rides across the South. Freedom Riders were civil rights activists that rode public transportation in the very segregated South in order to challenge the non-enforcement of the U.S. Supreme Court's decisions.
Freedom Riders coming down from Nashville, you must stop them if you can. Her response was, they're not going to turn back. They're on the way to Birmingham and they'll be there shortly. You know that spiritual, like a tree standing by the water, I will not be moved. She would not be moved. And I was shouting, young woman, do you understand what you're doing? You're going to get somebody, do you understand you're going to get somebody killed? And she said, sir, you should know, we all signed our last wills and testaments last night before they left. We know someone will be killed, but we cannot let violence overcome nonviolence.
After Nash's leadership roles in the Freedom Rides, Diane became head of the SNCCS, Direct action campaigns during the summer of 1961. Later in 1961, Diane Nash made the decision to drop out of Fisk University to become a full-time organizer, strategist, and instructor for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference that was now led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. In mid-1961, Diane Nash married civil rights activist James Bevel, one of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s most trusted advisors during the civil rights movement. They both moved to Jackson, Mississippi, where they began to organize voter registration and school desegregation campaigns for SCLC. Shortly after, Diane Nash was convicted of contributing to the delinquency of minors for participating and teaching them nonviolent tactics. Nash was given a choice between paying an enormous fine or jail time. Diane opted to serve her sentence while she was pregnant. Shortly after, the judge suspended her sentence rather than face the possibilities of negative publicity for sending a young pregnant woman to jail. Bevel and Nash were both arrested countless times for their work in Mississippi and Alabama. Eventually, in 1965, Diane Nash and James Bevel received SCLC's Rosa Parks Award from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. himself for their contributions to the Selma Right to Vote movement that soon led to the Voting Rights Act of 1965. In late 1966, Diane Nash joined the Vietnam Peace movement, and throughout the rest of the 60s, Nash remained involved in political and social movements. Later in the 1980s, Diane Nash fought for women's rights. Now in modern day, Nash works in real estate in her hometown in Chicago, Illinois, but she still continues to speak out to make a difference in society.
Quote the words that came out of that child's mouth. Here I am, an official of the United States government representing the President and Attorney General, talking to a student at Fisk University, and she, in a very quiet but strong way, gave me a lecture.
Every human life is valuable and important. History is very important, but history's most important function is to help us cope with today and with the future. And I know we have very limited time, so I always, in combining the history, I like to make observations about today.
In conclusion, though Diane Nash was greatly underappreciated, Nash was one of the youngest and most successful in campaigning and civil rights movements in this era. Diane Nash led the first desegregation nonviolent protests, which eventually led to the desegregation of lunch counters in Nashville, Tennessee. We should all take time to appreciate Diane Nash and everything she did more. In my opinion, Diane deserves a place in all history books.